Hello, my name is Derek Atkins, and this video lecture is entitled Telling the Better Story About Creation. This video lecture is for the course on church, society, and ethical issues in Asia at the East Asia School of Theology. Throughout human history, humans have interacted with the environment around them. For most of human history, most humans have worked, some have been involved in agricultural work of one kind or another. However, in the last 2 to 3 centuries, this has radically changed. And today, the majority of people live in cities. So during the last 60 years, there has been growing concern about the impact that we humans have had on our environment. And the claim is made, for example, we often hear news reports about natural disasters around the world, such as forest fires in Australia or the United States, flooding in Pakistan, heat waves, and record snowfalls. The claim is often made these days that many, if not all, of these natural disasters has been either caused or worsened by humanity's impact upon our environment. The claim is also made that unless we humans do something to reduce our impact upon the environment, that these ecological disasters will get worse and worse until we will one day experience an environmental apocalypse. So but as Christians, how should we respond to these claims and these concerns? What is our responsibility for taking care of the earth? In this lesson, we are going to look at creation care, and we're going to look at what our responsibility for God's creation involves. We'll also look at how environmentalists view creation, and then we'll compare this view with the biblical teaching about creation. So we'll be looking at what environmentalists say about creation, and we'll compare that with what the Bible says, and we'll also critique what environmentalists say, and then we will talk about how we can tell the better story about creation. Let's begin by taking a brief look at the history of the environmental movement. It could be argued that the environmental movement began in 1872 with the establishment of Yellowstone National Park in the United States by President Ulysses S. Grant. The Sierra Club was founded in 1892 by John Muir. Now, before the 1960s, the environmental movement was often known as the conservation movement, and it was focused on preserving nature. The modern environmental movement began in the 1960s, and many point to this book by Rachel Carson entitled Silent Spring as sparking the beginning of the environmental movement. This book was written in 1962, and the reason why it's called Silent Spring is because in this book, Rachel Carson warned that unless humans change their ways, that the day would come when there would be no more birds to sing in the forest and in the woods during the spring, hence the title Silent Spring. Now, another thing that helped give rise to the modern environmental movement was this photograph. It's called Earthrise, and it was taken by the Apollo 8 astronauts in December of 1968. During the Apollo 8 mission, 3 astronauts became the first human to actually circle another world, to orbit another world. And so while they were orbiting the moon, they took this picture. And this picture caused millions of people around the world to look at the Earth in very different ways. And this kind of changed perspective has continued ever since then. For example, many astronauts on board the International Space Station have commented how when they look down on Earth, their perspective and their understanding of Earth has been changed, because they often comment how when they look down at Earth, they cannot see any borders between nations. And so these are a couple of things that help give rise to the environmental movement. The first Earth Day celebration occurred shortly after the famous Earthrise picture. And the first Earth Day was on April 22nd, 1970. And since then, this has become an annual event. Now, let's look at some assumptions that are made by environmentalists. So right now we're going to look at these assumptions, and then later we will critique or evaluate these assumptions. So the first assumption that many environmentalists make is that Earth's resources are limited. This reflects closed system thinking. This is the idea that our universe is a closed system with no outside reality to affect what happens within this system. Closed system thinking can also be restricted to our own planet, in which nothing beyond our atmosphere affects our environment. This belief that Earth's resources are limited often leads to zero-sum thinking, in which all resources are pictured as a pie, like we see in this slide. This pie can be cut up into only so many pieces. Therefore, if someone gets a larger slice of the pie, another person must, by necessity, get a smaller piece of the pie. So that this means that if one person gains more, another person must lose what they already have. So this is what closed system thinking leads to, zero-sum thinking. So that's the first assumption that environmentalists make, that Earth's resources are limited. The second assumption that environmentalists make is that Earth has become overpopulated, thereby exceeding the carrying capacity of our global ecosystem. Now, this assumption was first made by the Reverend Thomas Robert Malthus, who wrote a famous essay in 1798 in which he argued that human reproduction or human population grows exponentially. That is, it goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, while agricultural production grows arithmetically from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, as we see in these two charts. This is what Reverend Malthus argued. And therefore, Malthus believed that human population would grow faster than the increase in agricultural production, eventually leading to catastrophic results. So this is the second assumption that environmentalists make, that our world is overpopulated and that population growth is a huge environmental problem. The third assumption that environmentalists make is that humans have caused immeasurable harm to the environment. Some environmentalists go so far as to say that humans are parasites on Earth's ecosystem. For example, we have this quote by Martin H. Fisher, which says, "We humans are the greatest of Earth's parasites." Now, think about this. If one takes this kind of language to its logical extreme, that is, that we humans are parasites, then one arrives at a rather disturbing conclusion. Basically, what do you do with harmful parasites? Well, you exterminate them, right? So think about that. Because this is the third major assumption that environmentalists make, that humans have caused immeasurable harm to the Earth's environment. Some going so far as to say that we humans are parasites on Mother Earth, sucking her resources. So the fourth assumption that environmentalists make is that Christian teaching is responsible for the ecological crisis that Earth now faces. Many environmentalists believe that Christian teachings are largely responsible for the climate crisis. According to them, the Bible's teachings in Genesis 1:28, where God gives humans dominion over the earth, leads to humans, and especially those who are influenced by the Christian worldview, into thinking they have complete freedom to use natural resources to fulfill their selfish desires. Therefore, many environmentalists believe that Christian teaching about creation must be rejected if Earth's environment is to be saved. This kind of thinking will obviously lead to hostility towards Christianity in general and toward Christians in particular. Now, some environmentalists also believe in the Gaia hypothesis. The Gaia hypothesis is the belief that all living things on Earth function as a single superorganism that changes its environment to suit its needs, with the ability to self-regulate those systems that are critical to sustaining life. So this is the Gaia hypothesis. It is the idea that the entire world is a single superorganism, and that as a single organism, our world is able to self-regulate itself in order to maintain a proper balance. Now, if this sounds like pantheism to you, that's because it is a form of pantheism. Now that we've looked at these assumptions that environmentalists make, let's evaluate them and let's see what we can say about them. So the first assumption is that Earth is currently in an ecological crisis. Well, there are several layers to evaluating this question. The first layer has to do with climate change. So is the world climate changing? Yes, it is. But then again, our climate has always been changing. Consider the following examples. For those who believe that Earth was created billions of years ago, there is considerable geological evidence that points to radical changes in Earth's environment, including multiple runaway glaciations that enveloped the entire planet in ice. At other times, Earth's environment was much warmer, with trees growing in Antarctica. However, even if we limit ourselves to human history, that is, the last 10 to 20,000 years, we also find evidence of climate change, including the end of the last ice age, which occurred around maybe 15,000 BC. Okay. What we do know is that humans migrated from Asia over the Bering Strait, which was then covered in ice that was thick enough to travel on. And they went on to settle throughout all of North and South America, becoming today's First Nations of Canada, the Native Americans of the United States, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, and the other indigenous people of North and South America. The Roman Empire benefited greatly from favorable climatic conditions. While these favorable climatic conditions are not responsible for the rise and spread of the Roman Empire, they certainly did help Rome greatly, for these favorable climatic conditions meant greater agricultural production and other economic activity that was highly beneficial to the Roman Empire. The medieval warm period took place from around AD 950 to 1250. And during this medieval warm period, the North Atlantic region experienced a warming in the average temperature, which led to improved crop yield in parts of Europe, as well as the establishment of Viking settlement in Greenland and Newfoundland in North America. This in turn was followed by the Little Ice Age, which occurred roughly from the 14th to the 19th century. And during the Little Ice Age, the North Atlantic region experienced a cooling in average temperature, which led, among other things, to the Vikings abandoning their settlement in Newfoundland and Greenland, and to lower crop yield in Europe, China, and elsewhere. This was also the period when the Black Death swept through Asia and Europe. Now, there may be a link between climate change and the spread of the Black Death, but there is no definitive evidence for this. These historical examples of climate change show us that the climate change we're currently experiencing is nothing new and can help us to gain greater perspective on present climatic conditions. But are humans responsible for the current global warming? This is what many environmentalists claim, that humans are responsible for global warming, or at the very least, that human activity is making global warming far worse than it would otherwise be. This in turn leads to the claim that our world is headed toward a climate catastrophe unless we take immediate action to arrest the effects of human activity upon the environment. The news media, movies, and our schools constantly tell us that humans are responsible for global warming. But we need to realize that not all scientists are in agreement about the severity of global warming, nor the degree to which humans are responsible for global warming. So let me just put my card on the table. I believe that climate change is real, but I don't believe it is a catastrophic problem like many environmentalists claim. Yes, it is having real effects on people and nations, but we are in a far, far better place to cope with any climate changes that might come our way than previous generations were. Furthermore, I am skeptical about proposed plans for saving our planet because I'm concerned that these plans to save our environment may actually lead to more harm than the ones actually caused by climate change. Now, I know that many of you will disagree with my views on climate change, and that's okay. My study of history informs my opinion about climate change, as well as my skepticism concerning proposed plans for saving the planet from climate change. So I may be wrong in my conclusions, and that's okay. But I may also be correct in my conclusion. And time will tell who is right and who is mistaken. The second layer of evaluating this claim that humans are responsible for the present ecological crisis has to do with pollution. Environmental pollution is definitely a problem in many places around the world. Air pollution damages the respiratory health of those who must live with it. Littering and other forms of land pollution can lead to the contamination of local water, which can lead to all kinds of waterborne diseases for humans and livestock, while plastic pollution affects many sea creatures, which in turn can result in microscopic bits of plastic entering the food supply that humans depend on. There is no question that this is a serious problem and that countries need to deal with this problem. The good news is that we've seen considerable progress with cleaning up pollution, especially in the developed countries. However, those nations that are less developed still have a problem with pollution. And I would argue that money spent to fight pollution is best spent in less developed countries, because the cleaner the air and water get, the more expensive it becomes to clean the air and water even more. So at this present point in history, we can get the most bang for our money by working to help clean the air and water in those places where pollution is currently most serious. Now, so this is the first claim that environmentalists make, is that that Earth is currently in an ecological crisis. And so we've taken a look at that, and we see that pollution is definitely a problem. We've also looked at the claim that global warming is a serious problem. And while global warming is taking place, there is debate about how serious that problem is and how much effect humans have had on global warming. Okay, the second claim that environmentalists make is that Earth's resources are limited. Now, on the surface, this statement appears to be self-explanatory. Of course, Earth's resources are limited. However, if we reframe our perspective, we get a completely different picture, because while natural resources are limited, human ingenuity is infinite. For example, take ordinary sand. If you look at sand, you pick it up, it flows through your fingers, and you think, what good is sand? No, but because of human ingenuity, we are now able to use sand to make bricks, glass, and now microchips. Similarly, crude oil used to be seen on the ground in certain places around the world. And hundreds and thousands of years ago, humans, when they saw crude oil on the ground, they had no clue what it was. And they would have regarded it as a nuisance. But today, oil is used. We are able to take crude oil and process them to produce fuel and plastics. And then human ingenuity have enabled us to create many tools that enable us to take better care of our environment and to make our environment become more productive. For example, the improved plow, also known as the heavy plow, appeared in Northern Europe around AD 700. And this heavy plow led to improved crop yields. There's also the invention of water mills. Water mills freed humans from having to grind grain by hand. And not incidentally, this reduced the economic need for slavery. Because if you have water mills, you don't need slaves to grind grain by hand. There's also the practice of nitrogen fixation. So you have nitrogen, which is an inert gas, and it makes up like 70% or more of our environment. But when you combine nitrogen with hydrogen through a process known as nitrogen fixation, this can produce fertilizers that greatly increase crop yield. And it is estimated, and nitrogen fixation was first became a reality about 100 years or so ago. And its development was spurred by World War I, when Germany was blockaded by Great Britain and could no longer receive nitrate from South America for their crops. Now, here's the point I'm trying to make. It is estimated that without nitrogen fixation, human population would have topped out at around 3.5 billion. But thanks to nitrogen fixation, human population has risen to our present day number of 8 billion people. In addition, there are vast resources that exist beyond Earth. For example, the asteroid Psyche 16 is believed to have minerals that are worth an estimated $10 quintillion, which is enough wealth to make every single person on Earth a billionaire. And that's just one asteroid. There are some asteroids that are estimated to contain even greater mineral wealth, including one that's estimated to be worth nearly $27 quintillion. And compared to the rest of the universe, our solar system is a mere speck. So the amount of resources that actually exist in the entire universe is absolutely mind-boggling. So even if we say that Earth, the universe itself, has limited resources, for all practical purposes, those resources are infinite. So that's the second claim that environmentalists make, is that Earth has limited resources. And we've seen that while resources may be limited, human ingenuity is infinite. Then there's the claim that Earth has become overpopulated. Earlier, we saw how Reverend Thomas Robert Malthus wrote that crop production increased at an arithmetic rate, while human population increased at an exponential rate. Based on these calculations, Malthus predicted that once the human population outstripped food production, massive famine or pandemics would follow as nature worked to reduce the population to a more sustainable level. Fortunately, Malthus's prediction never came true. In fact, the percentage of people in developing countries who are undernourished declined from nearly 35% in 1970 to 19% in 1990 to 12.9% in 2015, even as the world population rose from 3.7 billion in 1970 to 5.33 billion in 1990 to 7.38 billion in 2015. This means that from 1970 to 2015, undernourishment in developing countries declined almost 2/3, while the world population doubled. Now, unfortunately, these gains have been reversed in recent years as world hunger increases due to wars, COVID, and related supply chain problems. What's more, the second half of the 21st century may actually see a population crash. Already, the birth rate in large numbers of countries around the world is at less than the replacement level. Many population experts differ on what will happen to the world population in the coming decade, but a significant portion believe there will be a population decline during the second half of the 21st century. So we've seen that environmentalists claim that Earth has become overpopulated, but the various predictions, catastrophic predictions that environmentalists have made throughout history about a global environmental collapse have not yet come through. And furthermore, we've seen how even with a rapidly increasing population, we've seen dramatic decreases in hunger around the world. So another claim that environmentalists make is that humans have caused immeasurable harm to the environment. The record here is quite mixed. On the one hand, it is very easy to point to environmental disasters such as the Dust Bowl in Canada and the United States during the 1930s, which was caused by poor farming practices, the disappearance of the Aral Sea during the Soviet era and afterward, the Kuwaiti oil fires in 1991 during Operation Desert Storm, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico, which resulted in a massive oil spill that affected lots of local animal life, as well as the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. We can point to other environmental disasters that have been caused by human mismanagement or even human sin. On the other hand, much progress has been made in cleaning up or reversing the effect of other environmental disasters. These include the ozone hole, Many nations signed the Montreal Protocol in 1987, which banned the use of chlorofluorocarbon, also known as CFC. Since then, the ozone has shrunk dramatically. Leaded petrol was once used all over the world, but the harmful effects of this fuel led countries to ban the use of leaded petrol. And today, leaded petrol is no longer used anywhere in the world. So this is another environmental success story. In addition, many animal species have made a comeback, with their populations increasing dramatically after being placed on the list of endangered species. These animals include the bald eagle, polar bears, humpback whales, and bisons. The last claim that we look at that environmentalists make is that Christian teaching is responsible for the ecological crisis that Earth faces. Now, to answer this question, we will need to look at what the Bible actually says. And that's what we're going to do in part 2 of this video lecture. So please go to part 2 and let's continue this video lecture.